Welcome everybody to Vertical Talent Agency. My name is Brian. I'm the owner of Vertical Talent Agency, as well as a new podcast that we're launching called Clean Slate. Today we have a special guest, a client of ours, Angela Goethals, who became a great friend, a wonderful human being, a marvelous actress as well. And the movie that if you can't tell from the background here and people who are listening, I have a Home Alone background because it's 30-year anniversary of Home Alone. And actually it was 30 years, November 16th. So last month, and I just cannot express in words exactly how much this movie means to me, to so many generations that have seen it, who love it, who could quote it, and in particular, Angela's wonderful quote, which I will mess up, so I'll let her do it. So without further ado, we're going to bring on Angela right now. So let's get her video up here, and we'll get Angela on. Hey.
Hi.
Good to see you again.
It's great to be here.
Well, as I said already, and we talked many times, Home Alone, 30 years. It's just phenomenal to think that it's been 30 years since this film graced the screen. And, taking it all back in, I mean, you played a great role in that. I mean, you had one of the most iconic lines in the film. To this day, I don't know how many times I've heard people quote just that line. And I know everybody's focused on the whole, Macaulay Culkin thing, but that line in particular really just kind of stands out. And without further ado, I'm going to ask you to do the line. So,
what line do you mean, Brian?
oh,
Totally kidding.
little incompetence, exactly. Yeah.
You must be thinking of you're what the French call les incompetents.
There it is. There it is. Fantastic. Going into that role, I mean, how old were you when you got casted for that?
So I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And had just gotten my braces on. Super, awkward moment for most of us. But I had worked with Mac previously, and so I knew him. We knew each other, and it basically, coming into a movie like this, I mean, y'all have seen it. It's like, as an actor, as a kid, it was like camp. There were so many of us. I feel like the kids outnumbered the crew on some days shooting. It was such a fun atmosphere. It was an exciting story to tell. And it was just super, super fun. So despite the awkwardness of the braces and the 12-year-old, tween vibe, I had a blast doing the movie.
Well, I think, when you're talking about, 12-year-old girl, and even as a boy, the awkward phase of life, I think what captures that movie is that each character in that film is very true to what it was in America at the time. Which I always loved that about John Hughes in general, just because it feels so like he's talking directly to you because you feel like you're in it, so that awkward, even Buzz, I mean, I know a Buzz growing up, and that's what's so iconic about such a role. And then you go all the way back to who casted Joe Pesci. I mean, that's such an odd casting for such a childlike kind of film, did you have any chance? I mean, you had a substantial role in that, but compared to the rest of the film, it was a section. Was there any remembrance of being able to work with Joe, or were you able to be on set during that same time?
We were not on set for the majority of the kind of cat and mouse thing that Mac has with Dan and Joe. But the opening of the film is Joe standing there and all of us running around like a tornado, kind of acknowledging him but not, and sort of ignoring him largely. And so I do remember him. I remember he was a really good sport about it all. I remember the gold tooth that he wore, that I feel like would sometimes like feel a little loose and they'd need to like adjust it or but I just remember him as you know friendly. He had like a fun improvisational thing going because we were just kind of directed to run past him and sort of ignore him. So a lot of the things that he was throwing out, like hey little guy, when Kiri would run through, like that was all Joe just kind of you know improvising essentially. But I have I didn't really get to know him much off camera, or on. But I remember him being professional and good spirited, like good natured, because that scene there was a lot of just chaos,
Yeah.
and he was patient and he kind of rolled with it. So
Yeah, and what I love about his role in that film is that I've read, and there is one slip up of a bomb, but it wasn't from Joe Pesci. It was from Dan, which I thought was hilarious. That he had to create his own kind of cussing dialogue for that film because he was so used to having foul language, uh, and you could see at moments where it feels like, oh, that has to be tough for him,
yeah.
because here's this guy who's known for being such a hard ass mobster in most of his career, and now he's playing a bad guy, but a very loving kind of. You fall in love with those two characters, like the band,
Right.
love them.
Right. They're not as edgy
Right.
and crass. They're a like a kid's version of a bad guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and he did walk that line, but every so often when he's got the iron to the head, or he falls in the sand, you can see those guys kind of battling with their impulse to let fly, some four-letter words, which in another movie would be completely appropriate, and in this one, like they had to kind of do a little dance around that. But I think that they did a beautiful job. I mean, you mentioned John's movies, like there's this authenticity that runs through all of them, and um, and the thing that I think, I mean, even watching Home Alone now with my kids, which is a mind trip for sure. But watching it now, I'm so aware of the heart of this movie and the authenticity and the fact that you know it really is this kind of childlike, you know um it's like it's a kid's dream basically. And they do, I think, beautifully. I mean, Chris directing, like the film really walks that fine line between magical realism and truth and heart. So I mean, I think it totally holds up. I mean, sometimes there are movies that you think, like, you watch them years later and you're kind of like, huh, I don't
Yeah,
really know what I saw in that movie. But and I know that it probably sounds a little braggy to say it because I'm in the movie, but I really think that this movie holds up. Like it holds up over time. I feel like it's just as sort of awesome and cool and warm and loving and funny now as it was 30 years ago.
absolutely. And what I think makes a movie iconic and nostalgic, like Home Alone, is seeing other generations, like you mentioned, watching this with your children.
Yeah.
And I watched it with all of my kids,
Yeah.
and my youngest just watched it for the first time, and he's 8. And seeing his eyes light up in that entire film, and then also saying, "I would not be mad if you guys went and left me behind," yeah, I was like, "Are you sure? Can you handle it?" I
Classic.
got it. And he's like writing plans on a piece of paper of how
Oh
he would
yeah.
handle
He's
it.
like, I got it
I
covered, Dad.
got it.
Don't
It's
worry.
fine. And if I have to, I'll watch the movie. What I love about that, you're right. It's a kid's dream come true, really, in a lot of ways. And it just absorbs you as a child, and it's still iconic to this day. And I think that's why 30 years later, It's trending. It's still very, very much a topic for Christmas.
Yeah.
And in general, I mean, it's something we watch every single year, and I think a lot of families do.
Yeah.
Knowing that now, I mean, looking back, did you ever think that, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I was even in this, and how did I even get to the point where this is such an iconic thing that I was a part of?
100%. I mean, when I think back to, obviously when you're doing any, any project, a movie, a TV show, a play, a workshop, a reading, whatever it is, you approach it and you try to do your best work, and try to do justice to the story and the character and all of that. And you don't really have the perspective of, what it will be once it, gets released to the world, and once it becomes the property of the world at large, and isn't just like this thing that you are, working on. So at the time that we made the movie, I've often said that, my family and I, once the movie was done, we sort of, folks would say, "What have you guys been up to?" or "What are you doing?" And we describe the plot of the film, and largely people's reaction was like, "Huh, that doesn't sound that doesn't sound like it would ever happen." And that's kind of like, okay. Like, the reaction when we would describe the film before it was released was, like, "Oh, okay." It wasn't, there was no sense that it would become what it ultimately became. And so all these years later, it's amazing. I mean, when I was in college, I remember being out with some friends in New York, which is where I grew up, and we were at a Chinese restaurant on the Upper West Side, and these like young teenagers who were at a table, near us, were kind of looking over and like whispering, and one of them came up to me and was like, "Hey, were you in Home Alone?" And that was a moment for me where I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's like, these kids are now discovering this movie for the first time, and like, I still can't believe that people would ever remember me from this movie that we made 30 years ago."
Yeah.
It's crazy. But it still does happen. And I think that's what you were kind of getting at, that it just keeps getting discovered by new generations. And that is, it's amazingly humbling, and it's so cool. It never stops being cool for me to have been in Home Alone.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's so neat to see the nostalgia behind the film. It's so neat to see it grow every single year. I feel like it just keeps getting more traction.
Yeah.
And here we are, like I said, 30 years ago. I mean, I'm 42. I can't put it in my head that 30 years ago I watched it, in the theaters. And I remember, to this day, I remember going to the theaters to watch it with my family. Like, it
That's
was
so
it was a
cool.
big deal for us, like, to go do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And we did it around Thanksgiving-ish time. I want to say it was like we used to do the Thanksgiving thing and go see a movie.
Ooh.
And that was definitely one that we did. And I just remember my father has this he was a humongous guy, 6'4", like 320, just
Wow.
a massive dude, but he had the biggest bellowing laugh you can ever imagine. And he like just destroyed that theater that day because he was just laughing so hard about how great
Awesome.
the movie is. And then I hear my 8-year-old, who has almost the exact same laugh and doing it at 8. It's just like, wow, now that's a trip right there. And that, I
For
think, speaks
sure.
volumes to a film and how it was casted, how it was edited, how it was directed. And
Yeah.
every part, including every little part in that movie, was massive. It played a significant role of storytelling, because people do focus on Mac's role, obviously, being in it, as something that catapulted him in a lot of ways. But still, I think if that wasn't casted the way it was and the way it was put together, it would have felt pretty bland. Just
Yeah.
another kid movie. And when I think about the casting, I mean, I'm not sure you're aware of this, but hearing who could have been Joe Pesci's role blew my mind when I read that John Lovitz was in the
Right.
talks. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can't even imagine
Yeah.
with that movie. That would be a completely different movie. That's like casting Gilbert Godfrey, you know, it's
Right.
just
Totally different flavor.
oh, it's such a weird twist, you know, on that. But one thing that I think that speaks volumes, and I mentioned this earlier off camera with you, is that, you know, Home Alone had the Guinness Book of World Records for one of the highest grossing comedy action, they called it, films of all time. 27 years it had the reign, and it was beat out in 2017.
Yeah.
That's massive. I mean, think of everything that has come out in the genre itself. That speaks volumes to what they did, and being a part of that is just phenomenal.
Totally.
And I just want to say thank you for it, because you're rolling. I'm telling you, you're rolling it. That line, my kids say it. I hear people say it during the Christmas time. It's just so iconic, and being a part of something when you know, seeing a Home Alone book, kids book at Costco, and they are not sponsoring this, people, at
I
a Costco, is seeing, you know, opening up, and you're in the first 4 pages of it. And I was like, that's awesome. So
totally.
uh, do your kids ever try to, like, get perks from this or anything, like double espresso or,
What?
you know?
I mean, I don't think so. I do know that they, that their friends are now kind of becoming aware that my oldest is 8, like your youngest, and I think her friends are just starting to watch it and see it for the first time. And I don't know that she's like called in any favors or tried to, cash in on this, but I do know that some of her friends' moms are like writing to me like, "Oh my goodness, I'm watching this with, so and so, and and then that got us talking about you guys." And so it's like, if anything, I think that it's become for me over the years, and I hope for her too, like a kind of context for connecting,
Mm.
which I love. And like I've gotten, text messages and Facebook messages from mom friends who I've met over the years who, we've moved around a whole bunch. We're settled now, but we've lived in a few different places. And so I'm getting messages from friends of mine from other places who I don't see anymore. And they're saying like, "Oh, we're watching you on TV right now." And it's sort of like, this weird kind of feeling of like having spent time, all of us together. And
Mhm.
particularly now with, COVID, and with the fact that, we're not seeing each other in real time. It's that kind of virtual connecting is all that we're doing these days. So it's just been really nice, like to kind of feel like Brooklyn's friends are talking about her, and because they're watching this movie that I was in when I was not much older than they are now, it's kind of like this, you know, I think this awesome just cause for um reaching out and saying, "Hey, I was thinking of you. I was watching a movie, that you're in, and we got to talking about how much we miss you guys." And that it's just kind of like, I think that that's been, especially this year, one of the more gratifying things about being in a movie that so many of us watch around the holidays.
Yeah, that's pretty special right there. And especially right now that we're, going through a pandemic where we can't go see people. This right
Exactly.
here through Zoom or phone calls is all we got.
Yeah.
So be able to bring somebody and have a topic of discussion to bring people together, that right there is a winning combination. So, um,
Totally.
yeah, I think you nailed it on that. One thing that I noticed that's come up recently, the next door neighbors, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there was neighbors across the street during
Uh-huh.
filming who actually grabbed their camcorder and shot tons of behind the scene footage that they just kept for themselves, and it just was released this year. So it's
No
just like,
kidding.
yeah, it's very like camcorder, like VHS, because what, 1990.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, you're seeing like, the behind the scenes aspect without people realizing, I'll have to send you
Right.
a link, and I'll post a link when this is out for people to check too. But
Oh, that'd
it's
be
just
awesome. I
such
haven't
a,
even seen it
it's
myself.
such a cool perspective because it looks like it's black and white, but it's not. It's just grainy and old because,
Yeah.
well, it was a VHS camcorder.
Right.
Uh, But just seeing for them to have that footage still to this day, that just adds such another iconic value to such a really cool film in general. Being able to
Absolutely.
see a perspective of a film being brought together, and it was shot in like March time.
Yeah.
Uh, so if correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not never been to Illinois, but I don't believe there was snow yet during that time. So I believe it had to be brought in, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Um, so to be able to create, and a lot of people, who don't understand films, obviously you guys didn't go to Paris, so it was all shot in Illinois. Or
Unfortunately not.
yeah, I know, right? That would be
That
great.
was awesome.
But to be able to see, that come together through somebody else's eyes, I think it's really cool, to have
Totally.
that perspective.
And also, speaking about like the technology and what was available
Mhm.
at that time, even for, just regular folks like, wanting to take home movies, um, film, was nothing like it is today, and shooting a movie like Home Alone, whereas today with the technology that is available, and with um just different like editing practices, and
Mhm.
I mean, I probably sound like I'm kind of making it up as I go along, because I don't really know, but I do know that we spent about 2+ months shooting this movie. And today you could shoot a movie in much less time. Like, it's a
Absolutely.
much more condensed schedule. You've got multiple cameras going all at once. In when we were shooting Home Alone, you were doing one shot at a time. You would do a master, you would do a close up of this person, close up of this person, close up of this person, two shot of this person. And like, so shooting a scene, like, for example, the kitchen scene when
Yeah.
Mac, spills milk all over the passports, and Buzz, barfs up the cheese pizza. Like, that took an entire day or more. I can't remember now, but that was like all that was on the schedule for like at least an entire day. And nowadays it like, when we shot Home Alone, we were together for quite a while. I
Mhm.
mean, for weeks and weeks, it was us, just making this movie. And I feel like today things happen so much more quickly that, and you do, because as actors we build those connections, very quickly, because that's our job. And if they're not there, we fake it, because that's also our job. But 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 when we shot Home Alone, it was like, it was like, we spent, all day every day together for months, and really got uh just this awesome sense of community and connection. And so yeah, just that sparked in me when you were talking about the camcorder and the grainy footage. I was like, also,
Yeah, absolutely.
the whole process of making a movie just like was a lot clunkier and less streamlined than it is today. So and the flip side of that is that you got a lot more time on set, and a lot more time to develop those relationships, and and have all the fun. And so
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you nailed something too. I mean, people have to remember when this was shot. I mean, we don't have the ability to do effects like we do today. I mean,
right.
first of all, nobody would have found that house. It would just been a green screen in the first place, and some dudes
Right.
made it.
Exactly.
Um, but to the effects that they pulled off on such, I don't know how to phrase it, but just so amplitude of just so much happened in that film between the bandits and Mac, and just see what they had to endure. I mean, that was
Yeah,
all practical effects being put together. And that's
absolutely.
people I think forget how much work a team like that takes to create and pull something off. Hence, probably why another extra month is tacked on, because look how long it takes in
Yeah,
such a film. Just like this in seeing that, just that one scene in the kitchen took probably over a day or so
yeah.
easily.
Mhm.
and how they shot it. Yeah, it's an impressive. You have to become a family on set, or it's going to be a miserable 2 months.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, so that's it's a very interesting perspective, and I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think people realize how much is put into it.
Yeah.
Did you know at that time that this was a career path for you, or was this just like how did you even get into this whole career in the first place?
Um, I think by the time Home Alone came around, it was starting to seem to me something that was kind of pulling at me.
Mm.
Um, my the first professional job that I had was actually um, I was an understudy in an off-Broadway play in New York, which is where I'm from. And my godmother, who's an actor, took me to this audition. It was mainly at the time it felt like another activity, like something else to do in addition to, ballet and, whatever else, like art classes and playing at the park. Like and I credit, I think, my mom and my sister and my family for kind of for maintaining that perspective. It never seemed like it was more important than anything else.
Okay.
And that was important, I think, as I got older and as I started working more, because it can kind of, um, it can kind of be overwhelming and kind of spin you off your axis, I think, if you're not careful. But so my first job, I was 9 years old, I think, and I was understudying Sarah Michelle Gellar in a play starring Matthew Broderick at
Wow.
an off-Broadway theater. It's a beautiful play by Horton Foote, and it was starring his daughter Hallie Foote and Matthew. And I was Sarah Michelle Gellar's understudy. I never went on, but I went to the theater every night, which is what the job of the understudy is. When they're covering a show, and I would go there, and I would either watch the show to make sure that I was remembering everything, or sometimes I would watch part of it and then go hang out backstage. But anyway, so um, when Home Alone rolled around, I had already done another play on Broadway, and I had done a film with Mac where I played his older sister,
Mhm.
um, and I had done another movie that Chris Columbus had directed. So I had a couple of different connections there that created like a kind of familiar place for me to land. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like a career, I don't think I was really thinking about it in those terms yet, but I definitely was thinking, this is something that I love. This is something that I truly enjoy. And I just kind of, in that sort of like beautiful immediacy of youth, I was just like totally in the moment, totally loving it, wanted more, didn't quite know like
Mm.
what the future held necessarily, but yeah, I think by that point I was fully hooked. Hardcore love for acting and movie making and theater, and one of the biggest things I think for me that was such a draw was what we were talking about before, was that sense of family, that sense of community, that just creating a home away from home with people that yesterday you didn't know, and today they're like the only people you see for months at a time. And not the only people, but but it's like, I mean, it's just it's kind of a magical thing. And I think it was what was one of the most compelling things about the whole acting thing for me, was because I was a shy kid, ironically. And so it was just like, it was like, it was just a point of connecting and just making friends.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And for me personally, hearing how you started, I mean, that's pretty awesome. That's my oldest is 19, and that's what he is doing. That's he's been studying film theater quite often.
Love
So to
it.
hear that, that's going to give him a little more inspiration. So once he listens to this, so thank you
Well,
for
I'm happy to chat with him off the record anytime.
that.
For what it's worth, if he
Be
wants to geek
careful.
out on,
Be
I'm
careful. It
here
might
for
blow
it.
you up. You never know. But one thing I wanted to touch on before we end this, and first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I know we're on different time zones, and it's kind of hard with having kids. I totally get it. So thank you for doing that. And one thing that I definitely want to talk about is the second part of this that we want to discuss, and that is what we're doing with Angela through some Zoom meet and greets that we are setting up. So if you have the opportunity, people, I want you to definitely check this out. Angela is doing these wonderful Zoom meet and greets where you get to have an opportunity to do with what we're doing right here. And now you don't get a full like 35, 45 minutes. We got to keep it respectable to her. So we'll keep it around 5 minutes or so. But with that, the proceeds that we're doing from that is going to a wonderful organization called Scares That Care. Scares That Care was formed about 2007, I believe, by a guy named Joe Ripple. Joe had a family member, a friend of the family's whose daughter had a terminal illness, so he decided to wanted to raise funds for that girl. Through that process, he became a 501(c), and now he is doing it for not only just people with terminal illnesses, but like burn victims, cancer patients, things of that nature. His goal is to raise, I believe it's 100,000 per year towards somebody. So what we're doing, we're partnering with Scares That Care and Joe because it's a great organization. Myself personally am a burn victim, so I have a second-degree burn that I received. So I understand that process of just trying to heal physically and emotionally as well. So to see him give his all to this, and it's a whole group of volunteers, by the way, that do this. So we want to help Joe out some way. So what we're doing is we're offering Zoom meet and greets with Angela. You could get them on the website. We'll have the link and all that good stuff. And the proceeds will go towards Scare the Care Weekend. So it's what it's called. So Angela, just thank you so much for doing that. First of all, it's just a beautiful thing. And they are great organizations. So please check them out if you guys haven't already. One last thing before we head out, Angela, just, if anything coming up for you that you want to discuss, or are we just going to be looking out for 2021 once we finally open back up as soon as we're all safe and sound?
I know. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for all of us right now to even think of tomorrow, let alone next year, even though it's in a matter of days. So I'm the same. I mean, I had some things that have been pushed, as we all have. And really, in terms of upcoming projects, I am in a perpetual, gloriously torturous dance with with a movie that's near and dear to my heart. Some of you may have seen it. It's called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. We have a sequel, prequel that we've been working on, and it keeps getting pushed. And now we're kind of throwing a bunch of things, um, you know, at the wall and seeing what sticks in terms of ideas. So stay tuned for that. I don't have anything specific, but Nathan Basil, who plays Leslie Vernon, and I are collaborating pretty closely, and he's written some awesome stuff that we're workshopping. So hopefully next year we'll have um, we'll have some more to share on that.
Beautiful. Well, you just made me extremely excited. One of my
I knew
favorite.
that might pique your interest, Brian.
Absolutely. It's one of my
Just a
favorite
little
horror
bit.
movies of all time. So,
Yeah.
and then be able to see Nathan and you on the screen together again, hopefully, is what I'm hoping from this. Will be phenomenal because Nathan's just a beautiful man in general, and I love him to death. So, Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian Jones. It's my pleasure.
So weird hearing my full name. That was strange.
You're not in trouble.
It's weird. Yeah, it's just don't say my middle name, and then I think I'm in trouble. I appreciate you as always. People, please check out Angela online. Let's rally behind them to get that prequel made. And everybody, if you haven't got a chance, please go check out Home Alone. I know that sounds weird even saying that because you probably have a billion times. But if you have it, you need to go watch it because seriously, you're missing out. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it'll warm your heart. And
absolutely. You can even make it a drinking game if you need to. So whatever you got to do, have fun with it. But be safe, stay inside when you do it. So
yes.
All right. Thank you, Angela. We appreciate you, and talk to you soon. Bye.
I love you guys. Bye.